Have you ever cancelled plans for something you were actually looking forward to and then felt relieved? Or maybe you've been sitting there with every intention of doing something you actually wanted to do, and then you just don't. And then you feel really bad about it. You just feel really awful because you wanted to do it. And then the next day, you just do the same thing. I used to think that this was a character flaw in me, a personality trait that I would have to just manage. But then I started researching more and more about what's happening in the brain when these things occur. And I was genuinely surprised because I wish this was something that I knew sooner. Because it's not a laziness problem, it's not a you problem, and it's not really a motivational problem. It's dopamine. And most of us are running low on dopamine in ways that we would never even really question. And if you're new here, my name is Holly, and this is a space where we explore dopamine, wellness, nervous system health, and creative ways to help us feel good about ourselves in a fast-moving world. So if that's something you feel like you would like a little bit more of, I would love for you to subscribe. And at the end of this video, we will also be doing something called a creative reframe, which is basically a small creative activity that you can try with an optional digital download if you wish to follow along more closely. So let's talk about what dopamine actually is, because most of us have been told that it is the pleasure chemical. It's the reward you get after something good happens. For example, you eat a delicious meal, dopamine. You finish working on a project, dopamine. Or you get a like on Instagram, dopamine. But that's not actually quite right, because dopamine isn't actually about the reward. It's about the anticipation. It's the feeling of wanting something and not quite having it. It's a sense of something good being just right around the corner. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning. It is the feeling that your life is moving in the right direction. And there's a neuroscientist called Robert Sapolsky who found that dopamine levels actually peaked not when a reward was received, but just before, in the anticipation, in reaching towards something. So when your dopamine system is depleted, it's not that you stop feeling pleasure, it's just that you stop feeling like things are worth starting, and that quiet sense that something really good might be just around the corner just doesn't really exist. So why is our dopamine getting depleted? Well, the thing about dopamine depletion is that it kind of just sneaks up on you. And I think that's why most people miss it. But one of the biggest reasons, and probably one of the most interesting ones, is what's happening every time we scroll. So every new notification, every new post, every time we open a new app and something new appears, your brain gets a tiny hit of dopamine. And all those tiny hits of dopamine really raises the threshold for what your brain considers rewarding. So the more slower things in life, like cooking, reading, doing a creative activity, or going to see a friend, start to feel a little bit flat, maybe less interesting, and sometimes a little bit boring. But that's not because you've changed, but it's because your brain has been conditioned to expect something much faster. And then there's stress. And when you're running on cortisol, which honestly most of us are, your brain begins to deprioritize dopamine production, because from your body's perspective, reward seeking is just kind of a luxury that it can't afford right now. And there's also something that doesn't get talked about enough, and that's the difference between passive novelty and real novelty. For example, scrolling feels like a novelty, but it's not the kind that your brain actually replenishes from. The kind that actually helps is more like learning something new, doing something with your hands, or going to a new place that you have never been before. It's more about creating than consuming. And then there's the one that probably resonates the most, and that's when your days stop feeling like they're yours. When your life just becomes a sequence of things that you have to do rather than the things you've chosen to do. And in that state, your brain has very little to look forward to. And dopamine runs on anticipation. So let's go through the recognition checklist and get a little bit more specific, because I think this is where things really start to click. but you might be running on dopamine if you start things and you never really finish them. Not because you're lazy, but because the spark that you had when you started the project fades almost immediately, and there's nothing else to carry you through. Another example is that you used to have creative interests or hobbies that would genuinely light you up, and now they just feel like effort, and you really just can't really remember what you used to enjoy. Or you find yourself reaching for your phone, not because you want to, but because it feels uncomfortable not to. It's like your brain just needs something to chase, even when there's nothing there. Maybe you feel strangely flat in moments where you should feel really good. For example, you go out for a lovely meal, you receive the compliment, you've had the most beautiful evening, but it's like you're there, but you're not really there. It's like you're watching your life, but you're slightly outside it. And perhaps one of the most telling ones is that you have an idea for something, you want to do something creative, something meaningful, and you're so excited, but the excitement only lasts for about 30 seconds, and then the flatness comes back, and then you've talked yourself out of it before you've even begun. Does any of that sound familiar? So what actually helps? What can you do about it? And I want to get really specific here because a lot of the advice out there is either just too clinical or just not practical. So the first thing is protecting yourself from low effort dopamine. So not eliminating it because that's not realistic, but creating small pockets in the day that are genuinely low stimulation. For example, a morning without your phone, or a meal without a screen, or a walk without a podcast. Not because any of these things are bad, but because your brain needs to remember what it feels like to exist without the constant input. And in that quieter space, it starts to find interest in things that require more of you. It feels uncomfortable at first, maybe sometimes even boring, but that boredom is actually a really good thing. It's the beginning of something. It's the beginning of your dopamine starting to reawaken. And the second thing is what researchers called effort-based reward. Dr. Kelly Lambert found that when you use your hands to create something like cooking, making something, building something, crafting, you activate what she calls the effort-driven reward circuit, and your brain releases dopamine not from a passive reward, but from your own effort. It is your own creation. And that is why creative activity is so powerful for dopamine health. It's not about making something beautiful, it's simply the act of making something, and making something with your hands, making something tangible from your own effort. And the third thing is reintroducing genuine anticipation into your week. And I'm not talking about something that's going to happen, in 6 months' time, like a holiday or something like that. I mean this week. For example, making a meal from scratch, or starting a creative project that you've wanted to do for a really long time, or having friends over for dinner or something like that, or even trying a new sport, just something that you have wanted to do. When your brain has something to reach towards, that forward moving feeling will start to come back again. And that's what the feeling of motivation actually is. It's not really a character trait, it's a neurochemical state, and you can create the conditions for it. And that brings me to the creative reframe. So before I go, I want to leave you with something, because I think underneath it all, underneath the science, dopamine depletion feels like one specific thing. It feels like being disconnected from your own life, from your own senses, and from the experiences that make our lives feel meaningful. So this practice is about reconnecting with those experiences, and it's called the Sensory Reconnection Map. So I want you to get a piece of paper or your journal, and at the top, write the moments where I felt slightly more connected to myself. Then divide your page into 5 different sections, one for each sense. So you'll have sight, and you can write what visual moments make me slow down or soften emotionally. And then you can think about examples, like maybe it's the light through a window, or maybe, it's the colors of something you wear, or maybe something in nature that made you stop and look. And then you'll have sound, and you can write what sounds calm me or make me feel present. So maybe that's the sound of rain, or a specific song that you love, or maybe the sound of your home when it's quiet and everyone is sleeping. And then the next one is touch. So what textures, temperatures, or physical sensations make my body relax? So maybe it's the warmth of a bath, or a soft jumper, or stroking a pet if you have one. And then we have smell. So what scents feel comforting or emotionally familiar? So maybe it's coffee in the morning, a perfume, something you're baking, or a candle, or even something simple like freshly cut grass. And then the next one is taste. So what foods or drinks do I genuinely slow down long enough to enjoy? Not consume, but to enjoy, the ones you actually love to taste, not just eat. So write whatever comes to mind. Don't filler it. Don't decide whether it's significant enough. Just write it. Then on a separate page, I want you to make 2 columns. One, you're going to write what leaves me feeling emotionally flat, and in the other one, what brings me back to life. And then notice the difference. Notice how often the things that bring you back to life are usually quite slow things, or sensory, or simple things. They don't need to be anything major. And then at the very bottom of the page, I want you to finish with this sentence. I feel most like myself when. And this is the part where I just want you to be really honest, because that sentence is basically your dopamine blueprint. That is what your brain is actually craving for, underneath all the scrolling, the flatness, or reaching for things that never quite satisfy. And if you would like more on this, I have created a digital download, which I will link in the description box below. So if you've ever cancelled plans that you were looking forward to and felt relieved, or sat there wanting to do something but just couldn't, I hope that this video gave you a little bit of context, because it was never really about discipline. It was never really about being someone who couldn't follow through. It's just that your brain was running low on something that you didn't know it needed. And now you know what that is. So thank you so much for being here with me today. And please don't forget to like this video and subscribe. And I will see you soon in the next one. Bye.